It is a curious thing that many people believe they quit because they lack discipline. They imagine that somewhere, hidden beyond their reach, there exists a stronger version of themselves, a person untouched by weakness, hesitation, or fear. Yet the truth is often far less flattering and far more revealing. The real struggle is not between discipline and laziness. It is between desire and pain. Most people are willing to pursue a goal as long as the road remains tolerable. They will work when the effort feels rewarding, endure when the burden feels meaningful, and persist when the outcome seems near. But the moment pain arrives without permission, when progress becomes slow, when failure becomes visible, when loneliness, rejection, or uncertainty begin to speak, they retreat. Not because they have lost sight of their destination, but because they are still governed by the very thing they hope to escape. Pain has a peculiar authority over the human soul. It persuades us that discomfort is danger, that resistance is a sign to stop, and that relief is the highest good. And so we abandon dreams, habits, commitments, and callings, not because they were impossible, but because pain whispered more convincingly than purpose. There is a common belief that what prevents a person from moving forward is a lack of strength. We often speak as though success belongs to those who possess some rare inner quality that others simply do not have. Yet when we examine our own lives with honesty, a different picture begins to emerge. The problem is not always that we are weak. More often, it is that something else has been given authority over us. A master is not merely someone who gives commands. A master is whatever possesses the power to determine our actions. It is whatever can alter our decisions, redirect our plans, and persuade us to abandon what we once considered important. In that sense, many people who believe themselves to be independent are living under a rule they scarcely recognize. Pain has become their master. This does not mean physical pain alone. There are many forms of suffering that leave no visible mark. The pain of rejection, the pain of failure, the pain of uncertainty, the pain of embarrassment, the pain of being misunderstood, and perhaps most of all, the pain of discovering that reality is harder than imagination promised. These are the pains that quietly govern countless lives. A person decides to pursue a goal. For a brief period, enthusiasm carries them forward. The future appears bright, and effort feels almost effortless. They imagine what they will become, and the vision itself supplies energy. But sooner or later reality arrives. Progress slows. Mistakes appear. The excitement fades. The work becomes repetitive. The reward seems distant. At that moment, something interesting happens. The goal has not changed. The reason for pursuing it has not changed. The value of the destination remains exactly what it was before. Yet the individual begins to question everything. What appeared certain now appears doubtful. What once seemed worthwhile now seems burdensome. The goal did not lose its value. Pain merely gained a voice. Human beings are remarkably skilled at disguising this process. Rarely do we say, "I stopped because discomfort frightened me." Instead, we invent more respectable explanations. We convince ourselves that the timing was wrong, that another opportunity is better, that our passion has changed, or that the objective was not truly important. Sometimes these explanations contain a measure of truth, but often they serve a different purpose. They allow us to retreat while preserving the illusion that we are still in control. The strange thing about pain is that it often speaks with the tone of reason. It does not usually shout. It whispers. It suggests caution where courage is required. It recommends comfort when perseverance is necessary. It presents surrender as wisdom and avoidance as maturity. Many people imagine that freedom means doing whatever feels right in the moment. Yet a person who can only act when conditions are pleasant is not free at all. Such a person remains dependent upon circumstances. Their decisions are dictated by comfort and discomfort in the same way a ship is carried by currents it cannot resist. True freedom begins when pain loses its authority to decide our actions. This does not mean becoming indifferent to suffering. It does not mean enjoying hardship for its own sake. Pain remains unpleasant because it is pain. The courageous person feels discomfort just as deeply as anyone else. The difference is not in what they feel but in who is permitted to rule. There is an important distinction between listening to pain and obeying it. Pain can provide information. It can reveal weakness, expose limitations, and remind us of our humanity. But information is not authority. The moment pain becomes the deciding voice in every choice, it ceases to be a messenger and becomes a master. Many dreams die not because they were impossible, but because they encountered resistance. Many talents remain undeveloped because growth demanded patience. Many lives remain smaller than they could have been because discomfort was granted a throne it never deserved. A person may possess intelligence, opportunity, resources, and even sincere desire, yet still remain trapped if every significant decision is filtered through the question of how much it hurts. The tragedy is not that pain exists. The tragedy is that so many people unconsciously surrender to it long before they have discovered what lies beyond it. There is something deeply attractive about comfort. It rarely announces itself as a danger. It does not arrive with the appearance of an enemy. On the contrary, it presents itself as a friend, a reward, and sometimes even as a necessity. Because of this, many people spend years defending the very thing that quietly weakens their ability to become who they were capable of becoming. Most of us imagine that our greatest obstacles will appear in dramatic forms. We expect to face obvious temptations, severe hardships, or visible opposition. Yet some of the most powerful forces in human life operate with remarkable subtlety. Comfort is one of them. It asks for very little at first. It merely suggests a shorter path, an easier choice, a delay until tomorrow, a small exception to a commitment. Each individual decision appears harmless, and often it is. The danger lies not in a single choice, but in the gradual formation of a habit. Human nature possesses a peculiar tendency. We naturally move toward what is pleasant and away from what is painful. This instinct is not entirely wrong. It serves useful purposes and helps preserve life itself. Yet when this tendency becomes the highest principle governing our decisions, something begins to change within us. We cease to ask what is right, what is necessary, or what is meaningful. Instead, we ask what is easiest. The difference between these questions is greater than it first appears. What is meaningful often requires effort. What is necessary frequently involves sacrifice. What is valuable usually demands patience. The most worthwhile things in life rarely arrive in a condition that spares us discomfort. Knowledge requires study, character requires struggle, excellence requires repetition, trust requires vulnerability, love itself requires countless acts of self-denial that comfort would gladly persuade us to avoid. Comfort does not oppose these things directly. It simply offers alternatives. It suggests that there is no urgency. It whispers that another day will do just as well. It persuades us that temporary relief is more important than long-term growth. Because the voice sounds reasonable, we rarely recognize its influence until much later. A person may begin with noble ambitions. They intend to improve themselves, pursue a meaningful goal, or cultivate a valuable discipline. In the beginning, motivation feels strong because the imagination is active. The mind delights in future possibilities. Yet eventually every worthwhile pursuit enters a less glamorous stage. The excitement fades and ordinary effort remains. Progress becomes slower than expected. Rewards become less visible. At this point, comfort begins to make its strongest appeal. The individual is no longer choosing between success and failure. They are choosing between immediate ease and necessary discomfort. The difficulty is that immediate ease can be experienced now, while future rewards exist only in expectation. Human beings often place greater value on present relief than on future fulfillment. The result is that comfort wins countless battles before the struggle is even recognized. This is why comfort possesses such extraordinary power. It does not need to defeat ambition. It only needs to delay it. It does not need to destroy discipline. It only needs to weaken it gradually. It does not need to convince a person to abandon every dream. It merely encourages postponement until the dream loses its vitality. There is also a deeper reason why comfort prevails so often. It provides a temporary escape from confronting ourselves. Hard work reveals our limitations. Challenges expose our weaknesses. Failure uncovers flaws we would rather ignore. Comfort allows us to avoid these unpleasant discoveries. It offers shelter from the difficult truths that growth inevitably reveals. Yet the avoidance comes at a cost. Every attempt to escape discomfort strengthens the belief that discomfort itself is intolerable. The person becomes increasingly sensitive to obstacles. Challenges that once seemed manageable begin to appear overwhelming. Small inconveniences feel larger than they are because the capacity to endure them has not been exercised. In this way, comfort creates a strange paradox. The more we serve it, the less satisfying it becomes. What was once considered a luxury soon feels like a necessity. What once provided relief eventually becomes an expectation. The threshold for discomfort grows lower while the demand for ease grows higher. The individual finds themselves seeking greater comfort while possessing less resilience, increasingly dependent upon conditions remaining favorable in order to function with confidence and purpose. Many people believe that quitting is a problem of discipline. They assume that somewhere within themselves there exists a shortage of determination, and that if they could somehow acquire more willpower, they would finally become consistent. Yet beneath many abandoned goals and unfinished commitments lies something far more powerful than a lack of discipline. There is often a fear operating quietly beneath the surface, influencing decisions while remaining largely unnoticed. Fear is rarely as obvious as we imagine. If it appeared plainly, most people would recognize it immediately and challenge it. Instead, it disguises itself. It wears the clothing of reason, caution, practicality, and even wisdom. It convinces a person that retreat is merely good judgment and that surrender is simply realism. One of the most common fears is the fear of failure. At first glance, this appears straightforward enough. No one enjoys failing, no one welcomes disappointment. Yet the deeper issue is not failure itself. Human beings survive failure remarkably well. What troubles us is often what failure seems to say about us. A failed attempt can feel like a verdict. It appears to expose our inadequacies and challenge the image we have carefully constructed of ourselves. We begin to suspect that perhaps we are not as talented, intelligent, capable, or special as we hoped. The possibility is uncomfortable because it threatens something precious, our sense of identity. As a result, many people discover an unusual solution. Rather than risk proving themselves incapable, they stop trying altogether. A person who quits can always preserve the belief that success might have been possible under different circumstances. The unfinished project remains protected from judgment because it was never fully tested. The strange comfort of quitting is that it allows uncertainty to remain intact. Failure provides an answer, even when it is an unpleasant one. Quitting preserves the question, and for many people, an unanswered question feels safer than an answer they may not like. There is also the fear of rejection. Human beings are social creatures. We are affected profoundly by the opinions of others, often more than we care to admit. To pursue a meaningful goal usually requires becoming visible. It requires risking criticism, misunderstanding, and disapproval. The moment we create something, attempt something, or aspire to something, we place ourselves within reach of judgment. This is not merely an external problem. The imagination magnifies these possibilities until they seem larger than reality itself. A critical comment becomes a catastrophe. A moment of embarrassment becomes a permanent stain. The mind constructs entire futures based upon fears that have not yet occurred. Consequently, quitting often appears attractive because it promises safety. One cannot be criticized for work that is never completed. One cannot be rejected for a dream that is never pursued. One cannot be embarrassed by efforts that remain hidden. Yet this safety comes with a peculiar cost. The person avoids rejection but also avoids growth. They escape criticism but also forfeit achievement. Another fear operates at an even deeper level. It is the fear of responsibility. Many people assume they fear failure when, in reality, they are equally frightened of success. Success changes things, it creates expectations. It introduces new responsibilities and demands greater accountability. A person who reaches a certain level can no longer rely upon the excuses that once protected them. As long as a goal remains distant, it can be admired comfortably from afar. Once it becomes attainable, however, a different kind of pressure emerges. The individual realizes that achieving the goal will require sustained effort, maturity, and sacrifice. The dream ceases to be a fantasy and becomes a responsibility. This realization unsettles many people more than they realize. Fear also thrives in uncertainty. Human beings possess a strong desire to know what lies ahead. We prefer clear outcomes, predictable circumstances, and guaranteed results. Yet growth offers none of these things. Every worthwhile journey contains unknowns. Every significant decision involves risk. The mind often interprets uncertainty as danger. It assumes that because something cannot be predicted, it should perhaps be avoided. Fear then begins filling the empty spaces with imagined disasters. It paints vivid pictures of what might go wrong while remaining strangely silent about what might go right. The tragedy is that fear seldom demands complete surrender immediately. It usually asks only for hesitation, a delay, a retreat, a temporary withdrawal. Yet each concession strengthens its influence. Every time a person obeys fear without question, fear becomes more convincing the next time it speaks. What appears to be laziness is often hesitation rooted in anxiety. What appears to be inconsistency is often self-protection disguised as caution. What appears to be a lack of commitment is frequently a hidden struggle against fears that have quietly assumed authority over decisions, ambitions, relationships, and possibilities that once seemed full of promise. Most people spend a great deal of their lives attempting to avoid pain. This instinct appears perfectly reasonable. Pain is unpleasant by its very nature. It interrupts our comfort, challenges our expectations, and reminds us of our limitations. Whether physical, emotional, or psychological, suffering rarely arrives as a welcome guest. We naturally seek relief from it, and there is nothing unusual about that desire. Yet there is a difference between seeking relief from pain and treating pain as though it possesses no value whatsoever. Many of us have been taught, either directly or indirectly, that pain is merely an obstacle standing in the way of happiness. We imagine life as a journey toward increasing comfort, where every difficulty represents a detour from the path we truly wish to travel. Under this way of thinking, the ideal existence would be one in which struggle is minimized, discomfort is avoided, and every challenge is removed before it can leave a mark upon us. The difficulty is that reality does not seem to operate according to this principle. Some of the most important lessons a person ever learns arrive through experiences they would never have chosen voluntarily. Wisdom is often born from disappointment. Patience develops through waiting. Courage emerges when fear is present. Compassion frequently grows from personal suffering. Many qualities that people admire most cannot be acquired through comfort alone, because comfort never requires them to exist. A person who has never faced uncertainty cannot truly understand trust. A person who has never struggled cannot fully appreciate perseverance. A person who has never encountered failure remains largely ignorant of resilience. These virtues do not appear magically within the human soul. They are formed through encounters with difficulty. This does not mean that pain is good in itself. There is nothing noble about suffering merely for the sake of suffering. The point is not that pain should be sought, celebrated, or romanticized. Rather, it is that pain often carries lessons that comfort cannot teach. The human tendency is to focus entirely on what pain takes away. We notice the inconvenience, the frustration, the disappointment, and the emotional weight. These things are real, and they should not be dismissed. Yet we often overlook what pain reveals. It has a remarkable ability to uncover truths that remain hidden during easier seasons of life. Comfort allows many illusions to survive. When circumstances are favorable, it is easy to believe we possess greater strength than we actually do. It is easy to assume our confidence is unshakable, our patience limitless, and our character secure. Difficulty exposes whether these assumptions are true. Pain functions much like a light entering a dark room. It reveals what was already present but previously unseen. This is one reason why painful experiences can feel so unsettling. They do not merely hurt, they expose. They show us fears we did not know we carried. They uncover insecurities we preferred to ignore. They reveal attachments, weaknesses, and dependencies that remained invisible while life was proceeding according to our preferences. Many people interpret this revelation as proof that something has gone wrong. In reality, the discovery itself may be one of the most valuable parts of the experience. A weakness cannot be strengthened until it is recognized. A flaw cannot be corrected until it becomes visible. Pain often serves as the instrument through which hidden realities are brought into view. There is also a tendency to assume that every difficult experience represents a barrier preventing progress. Yet in many cases, the difficulty itself is part of the progress. The struggle is not separate from the development. It is the means through which development occurs. Consider how frequently people admire qualities such as discipline, endurance, wisdom, humility, and courage. These characteristics are universally respected because they possess genuine value. Yet none of them can be acquired without some form of hardship. Every one of them requires a person to encounter resistance and respond to it in a constructive way. Pain teaches lessons that cannot be learned secondhand. Advice may inform us, books may guide us, and observation may inspire us, but certain forms of understanding emerge only through experience. There are truths that remain theoretical until they are tested by adversity. Once tested, they become part of who we are rather than merely ideas we happen to believe. The person who views pain only as an enemy spends much of life running from opportunities for growth without realizing it. Every challenge becomes something to escape, every difficulty something to resent, every discomfort something to eliminate. In that constant effort to avoid suffering, valuable instruction is often ignored, and the voice that could have taught patience, strength, humility, and perseverance remains unheard beneath the desire for immediate relief. There comes a point in every person's life when they begin to realize that discomfort cannot be avoided indefinitely. For a time, it may seem possible to arrange life in such a way that inconvenience is minimized and difficulty remains at a distance. We create routines, seek security, and pursue circumstances that provide a sense of stability. None of these things are wrong in themselves. The problem arises when we begin to believe that the purpose of life is the complete elimination of discomfort. Reality has a habit of correcting such assumptions. No matter how carefully a person plans, challenges eventually arrive. Expectations are disappointed, efforts fail, relationships become complicated. Uncertainty appears without invitation. The question is not whether discomfort will enter our lives, but how we will respond when it does. Many people spend years attempting to build authority over external circumstances. They work hard to control outcomes, reduce risks, and eliminate obstacles. Yet external circumstances remain only partially within human control. There are always factors beyond our influence. The weather does not ask permission. Other people's decisions cannot be fully managed. Time moves according to its own schedule. Life continually reminds us that complete control over the world is impossible. What remains within our reach is something far more important. While we may not control every circumstance, we can gradually learn to govern our responses. This is where genuine authority begins. It is not the authority of commanding events, but the authority of commanding oneself. Many people misunderstand strength. They imagine strength as the absence of struggle. They assume that mentally strong individuals no longer experience fear, frustration, temptation, or doubt, yet observation quickly proves otherwise. The strongest people often encounter the same emotions as everyone else. They feel discouragement, they experience anxiety, they face uncertainty. The difference lies not in what they feel but in what they obey. Discomfort speaks constantly. It offers opinions about what should be avoided and what should be pursued. It urges retreat when situations become difficult. It encourages surrender when progress slows. It insists that immediate relief is more valuable than long-term growth. The person without authority over discomfort treats these messages as commands. Every unpleasant feeling becomes a signal to stop. Every moment of difficulty becomes evidence that something must be wrong. Decisions are shaped largely by emotional reactions rather than deliberate judgment. This pattern gradually creates a fragile existence. Life becomes narrower because only comfortable paths appear acceptable. Opportunities are rejected because they involve uncertainty. Goals are abandoned because they require patience. Challenges are avoided because they provoke anxiety. The individual may believe they are protecting themselves, but in reality they are surrendering freedom. Their choices are increasingly dictated by discomfort rather than by values, purpose, or conviction. Authority over discomfort begins when a person recognizes an important distinction. Feelings are real, but they are not rulers. They provide information, but they do not deserve absolute control. Fear can inform us without governing us. Frustration can exist without directing us. Doubt can be present without determining our actions. The mere presence of an uncomfortable emotion does not automatically justify obedience to it. This realization changes the nature of struggle. Instead of asking whether discomfort exists, the individual begins asking whether discomfort should decide the outcome. Instead of viewing every unpleasant feeling as an emergency, they learn to examine it with patience and clarity. The emotion remains present, but its authority diminishes. Building this kind of self-mastery rarely occurs through dramatic moments. Most often it develops through ordinary decisions repeated consistently over time. A person chooses to continue despite boredom. They persist despite uncertainty. They act despite fear. Each decision appears small in isolation, yet every act of perseverance strengthens an important belief. Discomfort can be endured without surrender. Gradually, the relationship between the individual and discomfort begins to change. Challenges that once seemed overwhelming become manageable. Obstacles that previously caused retreat lose some of their power. The person discovers that many of the limits they assumed were fixed were actually habits of avoidance. This does not mean discomfort disappears. In many respects, growth introduces new forms of difficulty. Greater responsibility brings greater pressure. Larger goals require greater sacrifice. The difference is that discomfort is no longer treated as a tyrant whose commands must be obeyed immediately. A remarkable shift occurs when a person develops this authority. Their confidence becomes less dependent upon favorable conditions. They no longer require constant motivation in order to act. They become capable of moving forward even when emotions offer little encouragement. Purpose begins to carry greater weight than preference. Conviction becomes stronger than convenience, and character grows sturdy enough to remain standing when comfort is nowhere to be found. Freedom is one of those words that people use frequently and examine rarely. Nearly everyone desires it. Nearly everyone speaks of it with admiration. Yet when we look closely, we often discover that different people mean very different things by it. Some imagine freedom as the ability to do whatever they wish, whenever they wish. Others understand it as the absence of restrictions, obligations, or limitations. At first glance, these definitions appear convincing. They appeal to our natural desire for independence and self-direction. Yet experience suggests that freedom is something more complex. A person may possess unlimited opportunities and still feel trapped. Another may live with significant responsibilities and yet experience remarkable inner liberty. This suggests that freedom cannot be measured merely by external circumstances. There is another kind of captivity that exists entirely within the human heart. One of the most powerful forms of captivity is avoidance. Avoidance rarely appears dangerous. In fact, it often feels sensible. It offers immediate relief from situations that provoke fear, anxiety, embarrassment, uncertainty, or discomfort. Whenever something threatens our sense of security, avoidance presents itself as an easy solution. We simply step away from the challenge, postpone the decision, ignore the problem, or retreat from the difficulty. For a brief moment, the relief feels genuine. The uncomfortable emotion decreases. The tension subsides. The pressure becomes less intense. Because the result feels pleasant, the mind learns an important lesson. It begins to associate avoidance with safety. The next time discomfort appears, retreat becomes even more appealing. This process occurs so gradually that many people never recognize it. They believe they are making isolated decisions when, in reality, they are developing a pattern. One avoided conversation becomes a habit of silence. One postponed responsibility becomes a habit of delay. One abandoned challenge becomes a habit of surrender. The difficulty is that avoidance never truly removes the problem it promises to solve. It merely postpones the encounter. The fear remains. The uncertainty remains. The weakness remains. Sometimes these things even grow stronger during the period of avoidance because they are left unchallenged. Human beings often assume that confidence comes before action. They wait until fear disappears before taking a step forward. They imagine that courage will arrive first, making the journey easier. Yet life seldom works in this manner. Confidence frequently emerges after action, not before it. Courage develops through confrontation, not through retreat. This is why avoidance creates such a deceptive trap. It convinces people that they are protecting themselves, while quietly preventing the very growth they seek. Every act of avoidance reinforces the belief that the challenge was too dangerous to face. Every retreat strengthens the authority of fear. A person who avoids failure becomes increasingly afraid of failing. A person who avoids rejection becomes increasingly sensitive to rejection. A person who avoids uncertainty becomes increasingly dependent upon certainty. The world itself does not necessarily become more threatening, but the individual's ability to engage with it becomes weaker. The tragedy is that many people mistake this shrinking existence for peace. They carefully arrange their lives to eliminate discomfort wherever possible. They avoid risks, difficult conversations, ambitious goals, unfamiliar situations, and challenging responsibilities. In doing so, they create a kind of safety, but it is a safety purchased at an enormous cost. Their world becomes smaller. The range of experiences they can tolerate decreases. Their willingness to explore, create, attempt, and grow begins to diminish. They remain protected from certain forms of pain, but they also become separated from many of life's greatest possibilities. True freedom does not emerge when discomfort disappears. It emerges when discomfort loses the power to dictate every decision. The free person is not someone who never experiences fear. Rather, they are someone who refuses to make fear the ultimate authority. This kind of freedom requires confrontation. It requires stepping toward challenges instead of away from them. It requires enduring temporary discomfort in order to discover that discomfort itself is survivable. Every time a person faces what they would rather avoid, they weaken the chains that avoidance has forged. The process is rarely dramatic. More often it unfolds through small acts of courage repeated consistently over time. A difficult conversation is held instead of postponed. A responsibility is accepted instead of escaped. A challenge is pursued despite uncertainty. A fear is acknowledged without being obeyed. With each act of confrontation, something begins to change. The individual discovers that many of the barriers that seemed immovable were sustained largely by avoidance itself. The challenge remains difficult, but it is no longer mysterious. The fear remains present, but it is no longer absolute. What once appeared to possess overwhelming power begins to reveal its limitations, and the person gradually learns that freedom was never found in escaping discomfort, but in no longer allowing discomfort to determine the boundaries of their life.